You're listening to the best of the bravest. Interviews with the FDNY's elite. You know, in the podcasting game, lasting is not easy. You know, everybody, as I put in the promo for the show, everybody wants to start a podcast. Everybody wants to do a podcast. And it's a great idea. And they're everywhere these days. But as far as what you want to do and who you want to talk to and what you want to say, that's the hard part, you know, and it's not easy to maintain that. But yet, the key, as I've often said, is if you have an audience, you're golden. If you have somebody or multiple people listening to you at that, you can build on that and you'll always have something, you know, it always starts there. You can't do anything without an audience. And for the 300th time tonight, we're taken to the air for that very reason. You know, from the beginning of this show, way back in 2018, when I was some kid in college, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I was 18 years old. I had a tablet underneath my phone as I was recording conversations with guests. Safe to say we've come a long way. We've gone through 100, 200, and now 300 episodes tonight. And I can't thank you enough for allowing this to become a reality. Because like I've said before, without you guys, there is no Mike the New Haven podcast. There is no Best of the Bravest. There is none of that. You've all made that a reality for me. And from the bottom of my heart, I just want to say thank you as tonight we take to the air for this milestone episode 300. And a quick shout out is also in order to Amanda Farinacci, a former guest of this show. She's been on the Best of the Bravest and a very good friend. And without her, the Chief Lieb interview wouldn't have come to fruition a while ago. The Chief John Esposito interview wouldn't have come to fruition a while ago. And tonight's guest wouldn't have come to fruition either. So when in doubt, you know, you can always count on New York City firefighters and New York City cops to stick their neck out for you. And she's part of that, of course, as the press secretary. And so a big shout out to her and everybody tuning in tonight. I could go on and on, but we got a guest to get to and a couple sponsors to get to as well. So first things first, my consulting company. Need advice on how to start your podcast? Frustrated with the editing process? Can't find a voiceover guy? Hi, I'm Mike Colón, and I'm here to help. I'm the owner and founder of MC Media Editing Services, your premier consulting company for all things media, where I can offer you consulting advice on how to get started, and once you get started, editing, as well as voiceover work, all for a very reasonable price. If you want to reach me, you can contact me at 917-781-6189 or the email that you see listed here. I'm always available, and I'm always willing to help. Again, 917-781-6189. Why go to some giant consulting firm that's going to charge you an arm and a leg when you can just come to me? If you want to be stress-free, the way to go is to call MC. MC Media Editing Services, your premier consulting company. All right, and for this 300th episode, we also got my man, Bill Ryan. The Mike the New Haven podcast is proudly sponsored and supported by the Ryan Investigative Group. If you need an elite PI, look no further than the elite Ryan Investigative Group, which is run by retired NYPD detective Bill Ryan, a 20-year veteran of the department who served the majority of his career in the Detective Bureau, most notably in the Arson and Explosion Squad. So if you need a PI to handle anything from fraud, legal services, and anything else that you might require, contact Bill at 347-417-1610. Again, 347-417-1610. Reach him at his website or the email that you see here. Again, if you need a PI, look no further than Bill Ryan and the Ryan Investigative Group, a proud supporter and sponsor of the Mike the New Haven podcast. Bill's a good man, a good friend, another big part of the reason why this show is at this milestone. All right. My next guest for 38 years has been getting it done with the New York City Fire Department, a longtime veteran of numerous busy commands. He came onto the job in March of 1986, and just about all of them were truck companies. He has some experience elsewhere, of course, but for the most part, he's a truckie at heart, and he knows a thing or two about emergency response in a city that never demands anything less than excellence in emergency response. And currently, he's the New York City Fire Department Chief of Department, and for this episode 300 and volume 54, the best, the bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite, we welcome FDNY Chief of Department, John Hodgens. Chief, welcome. How are you?
Mike, how are you? That's great to be here.
Great to have you, Chief. Of course, we met on Getting Salty tonight. I get to have you for a one-on-one conversation, and thank you for joining me for this major milestone for the show. Before we get into anything as it pertains to your career, where did it begin for you? Where did you grow up? And you had a father on the job.
Yes. Yeah, so I grew up in Staten Island, New York, born in Staten Island. My family was born, my father and my grandfather were born in Staten Island. And that's pretty unusual. Most people, come from Brooklyn or other parts of the city. when they built the Verrazano Bridge, and I think it was 1963 or so. But I'm a native Staten Islander. I don't run into too many people that can call themselves that. And my introduction to the fire department, my dad obviously came on the job. He came on the job in 1964, so I was 1 year old. And throughout my life, he was an inspiration. He used to take me to the firehouse, which I always enjoyed. My first experience was in Ladder 174 in Brooklyn. They had a tiller rig at the time, and I always enjoyed going there. And my dad, I think, I didn't think about it, but subconsciously, he was always studying. And I actually would, annoy me at times as a child because he was reading all the time. But, and then when I got on the job, I didn't realize that would be my career path. As you see, I was I was a firefighter for 12 years. So I didn't really jump on the first exam that was available to me. But, he had a great career. He wound up doing 33 years, rising to the rank of assistant chief, which is a 3-star chief. So it was a great inspiration for me, to look up to, and probably has a lot to do with where I am today.
Oh, of course, it always starts at home. Anything you do in life, it starts at home. If you have a good home, that's the impetus to do many, many good things throughout one's life. I should mention to all of you that are watching tonight, especially those on YouTube, if you want, please feel free to contribute in the super chat. If you have a question for the chief, put it in that super chat, and I'll make sure to highlight it. Any amount you want to donate is certainly appreciated. So coming on in '86, interesting time in the city, and like we were talking about off the air, working in Manhattan, one often thinks about Midtown and the glitz and glamour of certain neighborhoods with that. That wasn't your case. That doesn't make it bad. It was definitely a good experience for you, and you loved it over an 11 truck. But this wasn't your conventional Manhattan neighborhood. It almost resembled kind of like a ghetto neighborhood in the Bronx, where you're doing ghetto work, or a neighborhood in Harlem, or a neighborhood, of course, in Brooklyn. So for you, starting in a place like 11, I believe this was Alphabet City, correct?
Yeah, correct. It was the firehouse was on East Second Street between Avenue B and Avenue C. Yeah, I had never been to that neighborhood before in my life. Didn't know what to expect. My dad had worked in that area. He was actually the captain of Ladder 3, which is on 13th Street. And he told me it was a great company, and that I would enjoy it there. So when I showed up on the first day for work, it was a different experience from Manhattan, like you said. It was a neighborhood full of tenements and projects, and that was our bread and butter fires. We did have some taxpayers or store fires and things like that, but it was really 5- and 6-story tenements. Once in a while, a 7-story tenement, which created a situation where the aerial to get to the roof was quite steep on the narrow streets. But, it was an area that had gone through a period of the war years. At one time, box 423, which was 5th Street, it was a dead end off of Avenue C, was the busiest box in the city for structural fires. So, the neighborhood was pretty run down when I got there in 1986. Across the street from the firehouse was buildings with no windows, tin on top of the windows, cinder blocks in some cases covering the windows and the doors, and all around the neighborhood it was a different thing than when you would think of Manhattan. It was really kind of desolate. So, there wasn't if you ever had to go to the store or, drive and go somewhere in the area, there was never a problem parking. It was wide open. There was never traffic. And the interesting thing was, if you stood on the roof of any one of the tenements, you could see the World Trade Center.
Mm.
So it really was so close to the financial capital of the world, but it was its own little world over there. And basically, the whole response area went from, basically Houston Street all up to 14th Street and Avenue A, B, C, and D. So, I mean, if you stood on the roof of a tenement, you could see the whole response area pretty much. So but it was a great place to work. That's where I learned a lot. The firefighters that I worked with when I came on the job had all been through the 70s, where that's when, the place was really burning down. And in 1975, I believe, Engine 28, who was housed with Ladder 11 and Ladder 11, were #1 in the city for structural work. So those were the people that broke me in, and I could not have had it any better. They just really knew the job, and it was all about doing the right thing and all about doing the job with pride and being where you're supposed to be in a truck company. You were really held to a high standard, which helped me a lot throughout the rest of my career.
Oh, I'll say, and guys like that, you hang on to every word. And even if you're not having direct conversations with them, you're picking up on what they're doing indirectly just by the example that they're given. Now, you mentioned an interesting point in that standing on the roofs of these tenements, you could see your whole response area. Working anywhere provides you with the great opportunity for training, but being a truckie in a place like this and the neighborhood being what it was at the time, as you just described, opens up, the kind of training opportunities that may not be available to other truck companies, I should say, in your immediate area. So, what were some of the drills back then that were run that were your favorite to do and were the most challenging that helped you become a better truckie?
Yeah, so we responded to a lot of vacant building fires at the time, and so we did have a playground of drill, things that we could drill with. And one thing we did often, which you don't really see anymore, was we had fires where we had to get into the building, but the entrance had cinder blocks, blocking the entrance and the windows. So to get in, you had to take a maul and break your way through these cinder blocks. But the drilling part of it, there was a technique. And if you took out a course of the cinder blocks, maybe a little bit above eye level, and then the ones that you hit weren't attached to anything, and they would come out very easily. So it was a lot of there was a lot of drills like that. There was also drills in trimming windows, which really, I don't know, that could be one of the lost arts as well. All the windows had woodwork, and they were wooden frames, and also they had the sash weights. And you would learn how to just take a fully intact window, and you wanted to get behind there to make sure there was no fire extension. And with 3 or 4 moves of a Halligan, you had the whole thing stripped down to the bricks. And that was also one of the good drills we did. And of course, cutting roofs. There was never a shortage of opportunity to practice on that. So I think I had a really great opportunity. I had great opportunities there that maybe some of the firefighters today don't have. And we could just do a realistic drill at any time, any day of the week.
hmm Especially with those vacants being in the condition that they were. I remember Hank Millay, who's a good friend of mine. He retired out of 288, but worked a long time in Rescue 1 in the 80s and 90s, mentioning that a good roof man is worth his weight in gold. And I've seen it, watching these videos on YouTube of how these vent men on the roofs operate. And he's right, because that's something too that is still a beautiful art in the fire service. And I'm glad you mentioned that. I remember a line from Patty O'Keefe, also from Rescue One. He sadly gave his life on 9/11, where he joked in the documentary, Still Riding, I don't care if the fire's in the basement, I'm still cutting the roof, but it's good. If you could get a good vet man there, I mean, you see the difference that it can make. So I'll ask you, vacant buildings, you never know what's going to be in them. You could have squatters, you could have anything in there. What's a job with a vacant from your time in 11 truck that sticks out as, man, that was crazy?
Yeah, so I had a very interesting job in a vacant when I was a probie. I think it was May of '86. I had really just gotten there. As a matter of fact, I remember this clear as day. The captain, Captain Ed O'Connor, that he was on the department order getting assigned as the captain that tour. So he was making the meal. So as a probie, I was with him in the kitchen, and we were making the meal, trying to, cut everything up for him and prepare, like do all the prep work. And we had a run, and we had a fire, and it was on Allen Street, I believe, Allen and Houston. And we were maybe third due truck over there, believe it or not. It's quite, even though it seems close if you know the area, but there was a lot of companies in that area. And we really just we didn't, I think it was a 2-story building, and we went to the roof of the exposure, and I think we vented, some of the windows that were available to us, and actually they were cinder blocks. And, we got a little bit of work there. And then we went back to the firehouse, and we were continuing to make the meal, and we got another run, and we went up Avenue B to around 11th or 12th Street, and it was a 4-story tenement. Most of the windows were cinder blocked, but there was a few that had been already, maybe there was a previous fire, but there was no covering on the windows. And on the 4th floor, there was a light smoke condition coming out of one of the windows. It really looked like nothing, like we went to a lot of vacant building fires where, you'd pull up and you'd think, okay, that's rubbish in the building. It just had a certain, the smoke was a little light colored. It had a smell to it. You kind of knew that it was just a rubbish fire in the building. You'd have to put up a ladder, go in. Maybe the can would do it. Maybe you'd need the booster line at that time. We had booster lines. But that's what this looked like. So, the captain ordered the chauffeur to put the aerial up to the 4th floor. Me and Jimmy Kelly and the captain went up the ladder, and we went into the window. It was clear as day. We could see, everything. It really appeared to be nothing. So much so that the chauffeur took the ladder away and put it to the roof for the roof man to get up there. It was an isolated building, but it was the tallest building, so you couldn't use an exposure to get to the roof. So we were in there a few minutes, poking around. The fire wasn't like right in the front, so we were looking around, and I remember looking, down the hallway out where the stairs were, and seeing smoke down the hall, and maybe a little flame, a little orange. And I had the can, and I was a brand new probie, and I almost went out on my own, and I'm glad I didn't, because as it took. Within minutes or seconds, conditions started to change. And I believe now, thinking about it, I wasn't sure. I definitely didn't know what happened at the time, but it was probably a pretty decent fire in the rear, and there was a wind condition. So once the wind started blowing in those back windows, the fire came out as like a freight train. And we got to the window. The ladder was not there. So, the captain was very good. He was calm, and he just called the chauffeur. He said, "We need the ladder at the 4th floor, right now." And he told us, and as we're there sitting by the window, I'm looking out the window, and I could see people down in the street, firefighters and civilians, just looking up, and I just remember that, and looking at the rigs with the lights on, and it's a very vivid memory, because, within, I would say, seconds after that, we didn't have bunker gear. I had on jeans and a turnout coat and rubber boots. And I started to feel, as we were at the window, like a lot of heat on the back of my legs. And I still didn't realize how serious it was. But the captain said, at one point he said, "Okay, guys, listen. We have to get out of here. When the ladder gets here, leave your tools here," he said. "Just get on the ladder and get out." So, the ladder's coming. We're watching it. It's getting hotter and hotter. Now there's black smoke pouring over our heads. And when the ladder got there, I was the youngest probie. He said, "You go first." Jimmy Kelly, he had probably maybe 8 months more than me on the job. Jimmy went next. And the captain came out last, and I was down at the ladder looking up, And as he came out the window, fire erupted out the window, like square fire. So it was a really close call, honestly. And that was a brand new Proby, so it was a real eye opener. And in the vacant buildings down there, that's what the challenge was that the fire extended very quickly. You had to always be aware of that and operate accordingly, so.
Oh yeah, it's a game changer. And those are the jobs. I mean, listen, that job was almost 40 years ago and it still sticks with you. And the good thing is for guys that ascend to becoming a senior man, or in your case, move up in the ranks, you can school the young guys and gals coming on about a job like that, saying, listen, even if it's not a vacant building, this is what can happen. So A, B, and C happen instead of A, B, and C. If you're in this situation, do E, F, and G. So it works out for the better, at least. And thankfully, everybody was all right, and everybody was able to escape that, because there's a lot of situations, unfortunately, not just in New York City or across the country, across the world, where firefighters have not been able to escape it. So thankfully that worked out for the better. In 1998, you make lieutenant. And what's interesting is some guys make lieutenant younger, 5-6 years in the job. I just had Donald Haight on the show. He got promoted in 1982 after only 5 years on the line. And of course, he went on to have a great career as a boss, but that was daunting for him. I mean, it's still daunting, but you had much more time on. You'd become really one of the senior guys in your company with over a decade on the job. So do you feel that getting lieutenant with 12 years on, as opposed to 4 or 5 years, served you for the better, given you had more time to hone your skills and really learn how to be a firefighter first?
Yes, definitely was an advantage. I had seen not only a lot of scenarios of fires and emergencies that happen in the field, but a big part of the job is navigating, through the firehouse, what goes on in a firehouse, and that's where you spend most of your time. Let's face it. So it's managing the personalities, it's managing, what goes on there, and I felt that I had a really, really good foundation for understanding what I needed to worry about and what was just part of, normal things that happen. So I think that helped me tremendously, where I knew when to, raise the flag, when things were out of the norm. But, I had the experience and the years in the job as a firefighter to know, that to understand, that, what's serious and what's not.
Of course. And you went to Brooklyn Battalion 41, 157 truck is where you spent those 5 years in that specific rank, 98 to 03. So what's interesting here is, and we talked about this when you and I first spoke on Getting Salty as well, we'll bring it up here as well, which is it's not anything too out of the ordinary in that, look at where you were at 11 truck. Even though it was Manhattan, an entirely different borough, as I mentioned in my introduction of you, it was not the usual Manhattan experience. So even though you're still learning the rank, and that part, at least in the beginning stages, is a big adjustment, considering where you were going to a place like Brooklyn, as far as the fires and the jobs went, couldn't have been much of an adjustment at all, I imagine.
No, there was an adjustment. The adjustment mainly was that they had a much bigger variety of buildings.
Mm.
Like I was saying earlier, we had the tenements, and we had the project type buildings. That was our bread and butter. And if you go to that area today, that's pretty much what you'll see.
Right.
But Brooklyn, over in Flatbush, so I was assigned as a covering lieutenant in Battalion 41. And for, let's see, maybe a year and a half, I bounced around the divisions. So I saw many different areas. And it was as a covering boss, you get to see like many of the different firehouses. And I never found a firehouse in the 15th division I didn't like. It was a great place to work. But when I would pull up to a building, many times, it was a different type of building. It was a private dwelling, it was a brownstone, it was a frame building. It was a taxpayer where there was, a row of stores. These are things, I had never really seen, a lot of. So that was the challenge, was to really, experience, the different types of buildings Brooklyn had and the different types of fires. Over in Flatbush, we had Queen Anne buildings, and I read a lot about them, studying for lieutenant, but it really is a, fire that is very interesting. There's a lot of different things that can happen there. There's a lot of, as a boss, you have to know where to check for extension. You have to know about, if you go into the attic area, that, you don't poke any holes in the knee walls, because the fire could light up in a second and block your exit. So, there was a lot of things, a lot of new things to learn, which is what I loved for every rank, what made getting promoted so exciting, and and new, and because you got a new lease on the job to learn new things. So that is really, yes, that was the challenge, but at the same time, it was the best part about it.
Oh, of course. Each new chapter, each new rank presents, as you said, a great opportunity, because what's the old adage? With great power comes great responsibility. And you saw that in lieutenant, of course, and all the other ranks that you've held throughout. Now, I'll ask you before we move on to your years as a captain and so on and so forth. Was there a job? Now, as a boss, you never rest in your laurels. There's always, as you just said, a lot more to learn. But was there a job at some point as a lieutenant where you felt, okay, now I finally feel like a fire officer?
I mean, it took a little time, but yeah, I definitely felt very comfortable by the time I left 157, and I wasn't there all that long. I had a UFO spot there, and altogether, it was probably pushing 3 years. But I had a lot of experience there. I learned a lot, and I gave a lot of credit to the firefighters and officers there. I worked with some great people. It was really, at that time, and probably still, it's definitely still one of the busiest, but at that time there was like a hot run going on. It was the busiest.
Hmm.
So, it was a great time to be there, and a great, I learned a tremendous amount.
If not for, of course, ascending further in the ranks, would you have stayed there to this point in your career?
Absolutely. I remember the day leaving there. I was in the kitchen in the morning, and there was, as usual, a lot of laughs happening, and just a great bunch of guys. And it was my last tour, and I just, leaving there was tough. I felt it. I felt like, am I doing the right thing? And the reason it happened so quickly was because of 9/11. And they made, on the first day of promotions for captain, they made 90 captains. So, it sometimes the list might have moved a little slower, but 90 captains got promoted that day. And it was definitely something that I had to question a little bit, if I should have stayed or not.
Mm. Yeah, it was tough, and those were there were some battlefield promotions early on because of the circumstances, and then there was, of course, the promotions to follow. It's bittersweet because you wish it didn't take this tragedy. You wish it would have never happened. I'm sure you would have been much happier with that list moving slower, but nevertheless, it was a time in which a lot of guys, yourself included, stepped up because the department had to rebuild itself and you need to replenish that leadership core. So it was definitely a noble thing for you guys to step up like you did. And of course, you're still going as a fire officer. Now, Staten Island was different, of course, from where you had worked previously. Here you are at 11 Truck, here you are in Brooklyn. Now, a lot of people, when I interview my cops and my firemen on this show, they joke about Staten Island. The cop joke is, oh, it's the Richmond County Sheriff's Office or the Staten Island Fire Department. But there's a lot of work there, and I feel it's unsung in that regard. So even if it may not be Brooklyn or Manhattan, those 3 years as a captain, 87 Truck, I'm sure had their challenges and had their jobs.
Absolutely. Like, there were fires. There was definitely fires. What they didn't have was a lot of running, and some people would say that's a good thing. There was not a lot of running, but you did go to your share of private dwelling fires, and it was a really, I hated to leave ladder 157, but to be quite honest, I remember this. There were nights when we were getting slammed with, water leaks, stuck elevators, and it was just all night long, these type of emergencies, which, if you're helping somebody, they're stuck in the elevator, that's great. But with some of them, it seemed like a lot of nuisance work. And there were nights I would say, this is all part of it. I realized, because to catch the work, you have to pay the dues, and that's what that was considered, paying the dues. But that was not fun. So it wasn't. There's no way you could say that that's fun.
Yeah.
So I went to 87. It was very quiet. Like I said, you caught your jobs, but there was a lot of time where and I liked it. I liked it for a while, and I left there, after 3 years, and there was a lot of most of the house came from Brooklyn, so they had done a few years in Brooklyn for whatever the family reasons, whatever they wanted to come out with closer to home, but it was a great bunch of guys. It really was, and they were into the job. So there was no shortage of enthusiasm. There was no shortage of wanting to learn about the job. We did get probies there, and we would train with the probies, and it kept things alive. It's always great when you get new probies. It invigorates the firehouse. But it was a great experience. It was much different than Brooklyn or Manhattan in the fact that there was less running, but you had to be ready. There were fires. There's fires everywhere. It could be the slowest company in the city. You have to be ready for the worst fire you've ever seen.
Yep. And there's an old Dennis Smith line. This could be the night. They used to put that in the quarters of 82 and 31 back in the day. This could be the night. And you never know. That box would come in. You're thinking it's going to be a quiet night. And let me kick my feet up, watch the ball game, catch up on the newspaper. Boom, here comes a 4 alarm. Boom, here comes a 5 alarm. And you got to be ready to go. Now, I'll ask you, with that quiet time, can guys catch up on rest? Sure. But there's the opportunity to drill. And now you're in a position where you could take all that knowledge from 11 truck. You could take all that knowledge from your time out in Brooklyn and Ladder 157 in the 4-1 battalion, and you can inculcate it here, especially with young guys coming in. So tell me about running drills in Staten Island and what you specifically, given your area, wanted to focus on in those drills.
Yeah, so I actually took a lot of things. It was a tower ladder. 87 was a tower ladder, and Ladder 157 was a tower ladder. So, when I first got there, I observed, I watched what was going on. I talked to everybody there. You spend a lot of time with the chauffeur. You go out for the meal, you go on building inspection, and I would talk to, and they were all senior guys that, had been in other places. And, you talk about the area and what type of fires, to expect, and challenges. What is there anywhere where there's unusual buildings or things like that? And you would the drills we would drill on private dwelling fires, and I would share a lot of my experiences working in ladder 157 as far as laddering, portable ladders, the process of who goes to the rear, do they bring a ladder right off the truck? Do they size it up and call for the correct ladder? All these little things that we would work out. We had nailed it down to some really good procedures. In Staten Island, you get a lot of hearse tool work. That is one thing. You get more than I think other areas, because it's middle of the night. It's wide open roads and people speed, and and you get these car wrecks that could be pretty serious. And so we worked on that a lot. We went to the junkyard where they would have, and we'd cut up cars. And we would talk about, we had a whole system that we developed about, who stayed with the tool, who took the tool, who was the backup person, who did a survey around the car, looked under the car, made sure nobody else was who looked around the area, make sure nobody flew out the window. Things like that happened. And there was a lot to do there, and there was always topics that we could work on, and it was a big part of the culture there. I really took a lot of pride in training and developing the firefighters there.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's another art of the job too, the pin job. You're not happy they happen, but if you can go out there, and I remember somebody telling me this a long time ago, you're not taking the person out of the car. You're taking the car essentially off the person. And that tool, if you know how to work it, again, you're worth your weight in gold. So a lot of those pin jobs, man, it's amazing the rescues you guys are able to make. Because when you look at these cars, sometimes I wonder, A, how are you even going to be able to get anybody out of them, considering the shape they're in after the accident? And B, how the heck do you get them out alive? But it's a testament to that hard work, preparation, drilling.
Absolutely. And one of the worst experiences I had on the job, and there's been a few, but was a pin job. And it was a car that was a single car accident that wrapped around a pole on its side that had 6 people inside. And there was no conventional way to get them out. The doors were, the car was on its side, so you had to climb. It was a challenging job. And in the end, we wound up more or less getting access to the interior and using sawzalls to cut away the pieces of the seats and take people out. Unfortunately, some of it was piece by piece, and something that had an effect on me, lasted a while. Talk about, PTSD and things like that. But that actually, I thought about that a lot, for a few years. It was a tough one.
I don't blame you, and that's the part of the job that I always say, and working in a firehouse as I do, I understand this on the civilian side. If you see a firefighter having a certain look on their face, or they may be a little short, I always tell people, never take it personally, because you don't know what they just came back from. They could have just been on the worst medical, the worst fire, in your case, the worst MBA, and that's the stressors of the job. You guys see a lot of really tough things, and listen, it can have an effect, for sure. And those are the things. Again, that was how many years ago? Almost, if not over 20. And still, it has that effect. So I sympathize with what you guys have to go through in that front. Absolutely. So thank you for mentioning that. And, it's something that a lot of guys, unfortunately, have to contend with during their careers. Now, 2006 is a milestone year for you in more ways than one, because that's the year you hit 20 years on the job. But it's also the year you make chief. And they always say the biggest transition in a firefighter's career, if he or she moves up the ranks, is from firefighter to lieutenant, and then from captain to chief. So here you are, you make battalion chief again, another big moment, another big milestone. Where did you go upon promotion?
I was itching to get right back to the 15th Division. I went to Battalion 38. I got very lucky. I got the spot there pretty quickly once I was assigned over there covering. And, Battalion 38 is in the heart of Brooklyn. You could throw a rock and hit, busy companies in every direction. Rescue 2 was right down the street. Now they've moved to the new location, but it was a great battalion, a busy battalion, surrounded by good companies. Your job most of the time was pretty easy, because you pulled up to a fire and they just knew what to do. And there were a lot of companies condensed into that area, so sometimes, you let the engine and truck go out when you were the chief. And, there's no real advantage to rush in there as a chief. You want to let that initial response set up, do what they have to do. They know what to do. But you would get to a job in that area, and you'd pull up and they had 2-line stretch. There was people on the roof, aerials to the roof, towel ladder buckets to the windows within minutes. I mean, they were really good over there. And it was a pleasure to work there.
No, I can imagine. You got 240 engine house with you too. That can't be too much of a bad thing, I imagine.
Which one?
240 engine, I believe, is housed with Battalion 48.
No, 38.
38. Okay.
38. Yeah, 234 and one ladder 123 in FY house.
Okay. Yeah. A lot of hard workers there, a lot of hard chargers. Jay Driscoll, thank you for the super chat. He says, congratulations on 300, Mike. Looking forward to many more. Chief, pleasure hearing your story. Keep up the great work. And Jay's watching right now across the pond in England, where it's almost 1 o'clock in the morning. So I appreciate you staying up late for us tonight, Jay. It's about 12:40 London time over there. So 6 years in this rank. Now, there's an interesting story we can touch on here because my audience hasn't heard it. I remember asking you about this, and I'll ask you again. Hurricane Sandy in 2012. You were working that day, and that was another crazy day for you. Tell us about that.
Very crazy day. We knew the hurricane was coming. I was a deputy chief. I was working in Division 3 on 77th Street on the west side of Manhattan. And, I remember talking to a friend of mine who was home, and he said, "What's going on?" Because we were waiting for this storm. And I said, "Nothing. Nothing's going on." There was no fires at the time. It was only about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it did increasingly get worse from there. But we get a run, and it's for a crane swinging from a building. So the company's transmitted an all hands, and so we got call to go. So it was on 57th Street, Manhattan. The building, if you go anywhere, Brooklyn, Queens, parts of even New Jersey, you'll see this building. It's 157 57th Street. It's a very narrow building. It's the tallest building, and that the crane was on top of that building, and it had it was one of these tower cranes, and the boom had a piece of it had broken, so it was just swinging in the hurricane winds, and it was a serious thing. There was a lot of challenges to think about. Not only did we have to get everybody out of that area, evacuate the buildings. This was a 30-foot, maybe 40-foot piece of heavy steel that could have come down and crashed through the roof of building. We were worried. We were speaking with the utilities. Con Edison was there, and they had high pressure steam pipe running right under the street, right there where the boom was suspended above. And they said, if that boom comes down in the street, he said, there was going to be an explosion. Basically, it's going to be an explosion from this high pressure steam main. So there was a lot of tension. There was a lot of, anxiety about, getting everybody out of there. We got it done. And then it was just a matter of figuring out how we're going to secure this thing. So we had all of our, supporting agencies there, Department of Buildings, the crane and derrick unit from the Department of Buildings, who were the experts, engineers. And we just, as we worked on completing the evacuation, we used the fourth alarm assignment to give you an idea of, how many units we had there. We were strategizing on what was the next step. But what we didn't know what was happening around the city. And that was the highlight of the storm. So in Staten Island, the floodwaters were coming, onto Highland Boulevard that were 10, 12 feet. In Breezy Point, there was, the Breezy Point was burning. Basically, the whole Breezy Point was burning. There were many challenges. There were hospitals flooded in Manhattan, lower part of Manhattan. The whole Wall Street area was underwater. But we were working in our own little bubble there, and this was our main focus. And I was working with John Sudnick, who was the Manhattan Borough Commander at the time. And he got a call from Jimmy Esposito, who was the Chief of Operations. And he said, "John, what do you got? What are you doing over there?" And John says, "Yeah, we're evacuating the buildings." He goes, "You got a fourth alarm over there?" He goes, "Yeah, it's using up a lot of companies." He says, "Do you know what's going on in the rest of the city?" And we didn't. we didn't know what was going on. We didn't, and it was a lesson learned there, especially in the role I am now of like situational awareness. But we didn't. So Jimmy Esposito said, you got to release most of those companies. We got some serious stuff going around on. So that's what we did. We continued to do what we had to do there, but we just released many of the companies and worked, with a smaller crew to accomplish. But yeah, we were busy from 2 o'clock in the afternoon at this job till midnight. It was an all day thing. So in one sense, I had a new experience as a chief that I had never experienced. Midtown Manhattan, a crane like that, and everything that went along with it. The other side of it is I missed out on everything else that went on, and the fire department really rose to the occasion that day. We company officers were put in positions where they had to make decisions that normally they wouldn't have to make. People were trapped. How are we going to get to them? They used a lot of innovation, and they made great decisions. Thank God, we didn't have really any serious injuries or even worse that day to our members, and we saved numerous lives that day. So it was a terrible day in the city's history, but the fire department, I'm very proud of what we did there.
As you should be. And it's often in those horrible jobs that some of the most uplifting moments occur when you see the people that you're able to help, when you see the people that you're able to rescue, because this was an unconventional thing. And that New York City had storms before, of course, but never anything like this. Now, you mentioned being in the third division at the time. And we're talking with the Chief of Department, John Hodgens, who currently, of course, is the Chief of Department for the New York City Fire Department here on this milestone episode 300 of Mike the New Haven. Third division, it's a beautiful place to work. And you've worked in a lot of great places, but this is essentially the heart and soul of Manhattan. And Vinny Dunn, he made that division famous, of course, and that division was great before he got there, but he really brought it to the next level when he was there until his retirement in '99. Having started in Manhattan, but in a different place, having worked in Brooklyn, Staten Island, now being in this part of the city, how great was that?
Like I said, that was a whole new lease on the job, new experience. I I thought it was great. It really was great. I had, I was covering there, so I never had the spot there. But the area had a lot of life, and working there made me go into the books, even at that rank, because we had the under river tunnel, the under river tubes, from Manhattan into Queens, from Manhattan into New Jersey. We had Grand Central Station. We had the East Side Access Project was going on. We Penn Station was the first division, but it was close enough where we may have to get involved there. Um, Obviously Times Square, high-rise buildings. Just so much going on underground with the subway system and the railroad that it was great because I trained myself. I took a lot of time to learn about the area, and I just imagined what I could get called to, and I wanted to be ready. And I talked to the chiefs that had spent some time there, and I also dove into the books just to feel comfortable, and just get a new like I said, a new perspective was there, and it was nice. And even on the just to add to the nice experience was, you get off on a Sunday morning, you're on 77th Street in Amsterdam, between Amsterdam and Broadway, and you walk to Central Park and you go for a jog and things like that. When you were off duty, it was really nice to get off and just have. It was a playground, for adults up there. It was it was nice. It was really a good experience.
No, that's a good way to put it. Anywhere in the city is great, but guys, on this show, at least from my experience of chatting with them, will tell you It's always a different experience, particularly in the Bronx, particularly in Brooklyn, and particularly in Manhattan. And that's no knock on Queens and Staten Island. They're great too. But those are three boroughs. I get that a lot, that it's a different ball game when you go to those three boroughs respectively. Now, 2018, 32 years in the job, you make assistant chief. Again, another milestone moment for you. Upon this ascension in the ranks, where were you assigned?
So, yeah, I made a deal with one of the other deputy chiefs. I lived in Staten Island. He asked me if we could swap, and I said I would give it a try. And I came to Staten Island to the Division 8, and he went to Division 3, and it was Roger Sakowicz. And it was supposed to be a trial basis, and it turned into something that was permanent, which I have no regrets. I had a great experience in Division 8 as a deputy chief, and plenty of fires. Yeah, it was. Where was I when I got promoted? I was the division commander of Division 8, which was a challenging job. Division commander is a step into management, really, and you have a lot of responsibility, and a lot of it has to deal with personnel. And when you break down each division and the companies, each division commander and the deputy chiefs are responsible for quite a few companies and all the goings on in these companies. So it was a great job. I learned a lot. And it was 2017 when I was asked to go to operations, and I went as deputy assistant chief to operations. And basically, everything I did as a division commander, I picked up in operations, but I did it for the whole job. A lot of the things that I did administration wise, I picked up, ways of, monitoring certain, metrics in the department, and, keeping on top of, what's going on. I did that in operations for a while.
And I think this is something that, again, I'm glad you brought it up, because guys on the street sometimes, and I'm not saying this is the case with you, it's quite the opposite, actually. And that was the same case with your predecessor, Tommy Richardson, where guys in the street sometimes feel, do they understand what we're going through at headquarters? Do they know what it's like day to day? And the answer in your case is yeah, because I like how you've stayed close to the field. And that's important. Tommy Richardson was that way as chief of department. You're that way too. And obviously in the ranks that preceded you too as a chief, if you stay close to the field, no matter how high you ascend, you never lose a sense of what's going on. So when you mention metrics, that's what I thought about. And that's important, because if you're on top of that, you can identify these problems and correct them before the members even identify them.
Yeah. That is, you nailed it. That is the most important thing about being what we call a staff chief, is that you do remember your days in the field, and you have an understanding that our main mission at headquarters is to support the field. That really is, why we are there. And, if you understand that and you really believe in it, which we did, we had a good crew in operations. Tommy Richardson was the chief of operations, and John Sudnick too, at the time that I was there. You want to, have your ear to the ground and support what the field needs. That is really, what's important. When it comes down to it, that is probably the most important part of the job.
Yeah, absolutely. In these years too, while you're in this role as a deputy assistant chief, it's not just the jobs. And I asked Tommy this question when I had him on the show, and I'll ask you the same one. We get the invisible bullet, as I call it, in 2020, where you can game plan for just about everything else, and even situations where there's a virus going around. Never something like this, though. I mean, this hadn't occurred since the early 20th century. So when we got the COVID situation in March of 2020, when the world went just a tad bit haywire, safe to say, what was that like for you?
Yeah, well, haywire is understatement. There was so many things going on. So the world was shut down. We all know there was nothing going on. there was one benefit of the pandemic for us. I could get to work from Staten Island to downtown Brooklyn in about 22 minutes. So
Yeah.
that was one positive. But you know, we were at work every day. There was, the field was operating in this pandemic. They were out there. The firehouses were all open, right? The EMS stations were all open, and they were responding to these calls. We had, EMS was responding to upwards of, I believe the high was 6,700 calls in one day. The fire units, what was really something that we took serious was that we knew that an engine company was doing CPR, several times a day. Something that you do every now and then was several times a day. And most of the time they weren't able to save the person. So if you can imagine the stress of that and the mental health aspect. So, we took some steps to try to alleviate it. We put some RRVs, which is our rapid response vehicles, in service as, EMS units, CFR units, and we had data on which companies were doing the most. So I'd see some engine companies doing 30 EMS runs in a 24-hour period. It's basically nonstop. So we try to relieve them a little bit and put an RRV unit into their firehouse or in that area. There were so many protocols that we had to adjust to. Things as simple things like, personal protective equipment and making sure that the members were protecting themselves with, gloves and masks and, gowns in certain cases. And all the protocols that went with that. There was many, like what we call a buck slip. We were churning them out 1 and 2 and 3 a day on just, trying to, keep everybody up to speed on what was happening and what they needed to do. A lot of it was to protect themselves, because we didn't know what was going on. And everybody was a little scared, let's face it, at that time. So yeah, it was a challenging time. It was a very memorable time in my career because as the world was shut down, we were all at work and we had great camaraderie on the 7th floor of Metro Tech. And we really did, and we built some really good relationships there. It's something I won't forget.
Yeah, what I say earlier, in the worst of times, you also have the best of times, and if you're able to stick together, if there's ever a time in which your relationship with someone is going to be strengthened, hopefully for the better, it's going to be during a global pandemic. So at least that's one silver lining that came out of an otherwise very difficult time for the city, the country, and really the world, because this was a worldwide event. So coming out of that, and now we're fully out of it, we're back in rhythm, we're back in sync again as a society, which is good. You get the honor of a lifetime. Not to say that the other honors in your career weren't of equal importance, but this is the rank, and so many legendary figures in department history have held this rank. Bill Feehan, Pete Gansey, and I'm talking about chief of department. So here's a moment for you for a kid that was once upon a time in 174 truck with his dad. Now you're in the chief for the entire New York City Fire Department. When you were told that you were going to be promoted to this rank and that you were going to be, again, put in charge of the entire department, tell me about your emotions in that moment.
Yeah, so the path that I had, I kind of got broken into it in a sense, right? So I started out in 2017 in operations, and I worked my way up there to become the chief of operations. So that was even like, wow, I never expected this. I really didn't. And when the puzzle pieces started to align, and I realized I possibly could be chief of department here. It was quite a a shock to the system, so to say. To think that you're going to sit upstairs in that office, and I have to say that it was an honor of a lifetime. Like you said, it's a position that affords me, such opportunity, to help the department. And it really was, it's challenging and it's busy. There's many things going on all the time, but it really is, I really never imagined it. When I speak to Proby classes at Proby graduation, I tell them that I sat in that seat, in 1986, and here I am now. So, the sky's the limit in your career. And it's a great honor, to be the chief of the best department in the world.
Yeah, I agree. And they're certainly fortunate to have you in that position, and you've done a great job. It's going to be 2 years in June, I believe, because you were promoted to that rank in June of 2022, if I'm not mistaken. And I love that you mentioned that as well, because the possibilities in the department, like the New York City Fire Department, are endless. To where you could spend the entirety of your career, and here's the beauty of it: in an engine company and a truck company, never move up in the ranks, and have a great time. There's nothing wrong with staying on the line your whole career and having a blast for 25, 30 years, going to jobs left and right. Or you can move up in the ranks, become a lieutenant, become a captain, so on and so forth. And again, have a great time as you've had. So
Yes,
you really can't go wrong either way.
yes, and those people are very valuable. The people that decide they become senior firefighters, they are the backbone of this department. Really, they as the new people come in, they make sure they're prepared, and it's just a cycle, and it just goes on and on, where you get more, and you need those people, just like you need lieutenants with seniority, captains with seniority, and chiefs in the field with seniority. You really do. It's not everybody chooses the path to keep going, and that's actually a good thing, So
Before I get to the rapid fire, I do want to ask you this. Of course, it's different when you get called to a big job. We just had a major building collapse in Brooklyn where a worker was killed. We had a building collapse in the Bronx where miraculously nobody was too seriously injured or killed at that job. And obviously, there's the box alarms, 4 alarms, 5 alarms. If it's a 5 alarm, the chief of department has to go. I think a 4 alarm too, if I'm not mistaken. Besides those instances, which is part of the job, when you're not getting called out to these scenes, what's an average day like for you as chief of department?
the average day usually starts with phone calls and emails on my way to work in the car. There's things that I need to talk to people, bureau heads in the department, the chief of training, the chief of fire prevention, the chief of operations. And, if things are always, coming down the pike, as they say, and we discuss things. And I spend a lot of car rides, on the phone with those people. It's, and then headquarters, there's a lot of, there's meetings, there's things going on, there's things that we want to do in the department, and there's meetings about everything. It's one of the challenges of being up there in the rank. But it's a great, the days go by very fast. There's never a time. There's a lot of people that come by, the office, that want to speak to you. Most of the time I'm not in there, but there's a lot of, there's things, not only the department, what you would think, supporting the troops in the field. There's a lot of things behind the scenes that really not many people know about. In the fire department, it's a large organization. There's legal issues, right? We make agreements with other municipalities, memorandums of understanding, right? And it's a problem solving is what you do up there. That's what I do with my day. Is I get approached throughout the day with people that need me to weigh in on their problem. I would say that's probably the biggest part of the job. And, if I don't have the answer, I just get the people together that can provide the answer. So, you have to network, you have to, delegate. It's very important. You can't do this all alone. You can't. You know, you have to, you know, you lean on people, and it's a really, to make it work right, everybody has to work together. You know, they really do, and that's a great thing. And you feel, you come out of that day with a sense of accomplishment many times, that you really did do something good for the department. And you know, and it was a team effort. You know, headquarters is a team effort. It really is. You know, I work with all the bureaus, and the Bureau of EMS is even, it's under my purview, and Mike Fields over there is the chief of operations in EMS, and he's a great asset. He really is. He knows EMS inside and out, and he, you know, he really, he's a breath of fresh air. He really is. So I have it great, and I really do, and it's because of the people. You know, everybody's a hard worker. You know, John Esposito is the chief of operations. Tony Sacavino is the chief of fire prevention. Tom Correo is the chief of training, and Mike Myers in safety, and all the borough commanders. And you know, we all work together, and we also work a lot with the civilian side of the fire department. You know, we work with budget. You know, we work with legal. We work with you know, international governmental affairs. You know, there's so many different. Every day there's a new you know, issue or project or concern. We work a lot with OPI. I speak to them daily. So it's a very busy job, but it definitely, the people that I'm surrounded with, you know, we get the job done, and it's 100% a team effort.
Yeah, well said. Nothing I can say to follow that up, and I won't try to. So on that note, we'll go into the rapid fire. You know, it's 5 hit and run questions from me, 5 hit and run answers from you. You could say pass if you want. And the first question is going to be funniest call or calls you ever responded to.
Yeah, so you know, there's one funny call that stands out in my mind. I was actually working in a truck company in Brooklyn, and we got called to an EMS carry down, which means that they need help bringing somebody down. You know, up, it was up in one of the apartments. So we go to a 6-story, low-rise, multiple dwelling, fireproof, multiple dwelling, and we go up to the apartment. EMS is on the scene, and there's a person, a very large person, on the floor, you know, with no clothes on, and they're breathing, but they're like, they're unconscious. You know, you could hear them breathing, but you know, they're not. We can't wake them up. So we have to get them into the ambulance, and you know, that's why we were called, because you know, we're gonna accomplish this, and you know, we're all up there trying to strategize what we're going to do, and we decide that, you know, we were going to put them onto on top of a body bag, not in a body bag. They were alive, and but we had to, you know, roll them up, get the body bag under, and we were trying to think how we're going to get them out. So we had the tower ladder at the 6th floor window. We had trimmed out the window. We decided we'll get them into the elevator, and as as the probie goes to like push the person up, who has no clothes on, like I told you, you know, as he pushes them, they're on their stomach. As he pushes them up, he gets like blasted with a whiff or something, and he just runs for the window and starts puking out the window. And it was quite the scene. And you know, and we still had to push through, and we got it done. We got it done, and we had to get this person down. And you know, actually, the way it happened was rescue got involved, and we put them into a one of the wire Stokes baskets, and they set up a high anchor, you know, where we actually lowered them down the stairwell. We couldn't get them into the elevator, so it was it was innovative. It was challenging. At times, it was funny. And something that sticks out in my mind as one of the craziest jobs I've ever been to.
I'll say it reminds me of something I saw in the Bravest years ago. It's on YouTube. Rescue 2 had a similar job on a 600-pound guy. They
That may
put
have,
him on.
it may have been it. They were there.
Yeah, yeah. And they put him on two gurneys, and the gurneys collapsed. They couldn't handle his weight. So they had to get him out of his bedroom. And this guy had clothes on though, so it's probably a
Yeah,
different
no,
job.
it's because this was a woman. Yeah, but
Ah,
Rescue 2, actually, they were there setting up, the special equipment we needed to get them down. And it was a really well run operation because once you got them into the well hole of the stairwell, it was just guiding the Stokes basket down. Like the high anchor was, taking care of all the weight.
well, at least they were there. So on that note, second question of the rapid fire: most uplifting call. Not talking about lifting up people of that nature, but uplifting in the positive sense. Call you ever responded to?
Yeah, I get to go a lot of uplifting calls now. I go to the big jobs, right? I watch what the brothers and sisters do out there. That's uplifting in itself. It really is. It's just, as everything comes together at these big jobs, 3, 4 tower ladders up. Everything that came before that, where we were working hard on this fire, and it's just that's very uplifting to see how well trained and how well the department operates. But I have to say, last year, and you'll remember this job, was maybe one of the most uplifting jobs I've been to. It was the life-saving rope rescue on 52nd Street, Manhattan, I think. So, yeah, I was at a funeral it was probably, I think it was Westchester, not too far from the city. And so, you have the funeral, you're inside at the mass, I have my phone on vibrate, and I know something's going on, but I always think it's kind of impolite to start staring at your phone, but I do it anyway because I feel like something, I have to see what's going on. So, I see this job going on in a high rise in Manhattan, and I see that FDOC, which is our operations center, is trying to call me. But, I don't see anything really unusual, like, injured member or, even worse. So I stay in the mass, and as soon as I get out, and the job is still going on. So it was probably towards the end of the mass. And, I find out what's going on. We have people trapped on the 20th floor, I believe, of this high-rise building. And we were going to perform a life-saving rope rescue. And that's all I knew. And, I made my way down into Manhattan and down to 52nd Street. As I got there, it was over. I didn't see it happen, but I knew what happened. And actually, there was video already that I could look at. And the members that had performed the rescues were down in the street. And, one was a probie. They were members, they were firefighters from different companies, who never worked together, that pulled this off. So it was really uplifting to know, especially when you saw the video, that we were able to 20 stories in the air, save 3 lives out the window. So challenging. I went up to the 20th floor, looked out the window, and it was you don't think about it when you're in that moment, but to do it when you're just taking a look, I felt it like that rumble in my stomach, because it was to think of going out on a rope. It took a lot of guts, it really did. And they did a fantastic job, and it was challenging with that. There was a child gate on the window, and they had to remove that to get somebody was caught on it, and they're suspended up in the air on a 9/16 inch rope. It was very uplifting because it was such a great outcome. With the 3 lives saved. So very uplifting. There's others, but that one is more recent and sticks out in my mind.
Made the cover of a few papers. I believe it made the cover of the Post in particular, which I remember that cover. And yeah, it was a great job that they were able to save. I mean, in that photo, they're rescuing a woman, but as you mentioned, it was 3 people who were saved that day. So it was an incredible job all around. Before I continue with the rapid fire, Steve Iorado, Vic, if we could highlight his question. You had a big crane fire in Manhattan last year. Pieces were falling into the street, and drones were actually used on this job. Steve's just asking, how do you think that job went? How do you think it was handled?
Yeah, I think that it was handled very well. I went to that job. It was challenging in the fact that the crane was on fire and we stretched hose lines through the building. And you don't realize it. The crane is so high above the roof line, they couldn't reach the fire from the roof. So we had to figure out how to hit it from an adjoining building. And they set up what's called, I believe it was a blitz fire or a multiversal, and they were able to get water on it from the building across the street. It was very challenging in that effect. We were very lucky there that day. As the crane collapsed, we pulled into the block, Battalion 9 in particular, and they started to get rained on from debris that was falling, from what the crane was originally holding up was a bag of concrete. So as that, was going sideways, it was raining debris on the apparatus as it was arriving on the scene. And it was, it could have been a lot worse. We got very lucky there. Even the civilians, to get everybody off that street at that time of the morning was that in itself was a great job that we did. Yeah, it was, what fell off the crane was, I believe, like I said, it was a bag of concrete that was equal to a cement mixer. The concrete in this bag was a whole load of a cement mixer. So falling down on, I think it was 9th Avenue at that time of day, and nobody was killed, was amazing. But the job went well. I think we performed, very well, and thank God there was really no serious injuries there.
Absolutely. Fourth question, the rapid fire, second to last one. Favorite bar or restaurant in New York City? You could say multiple if you want.
Yeah, there's multiple. New York City. So I live in Staten Island, so I consider that New York City. Many people might not. if you're thinking of Manhattan, that's another story. But right where I live, there's a really nice place that I can walk to. And in the summer, they have a tiki bar. And, if you're in Staten Island, you should check it out. It's called the Marina Cafe. And it's a really, in the summer with the boats and the sunset, I enjoy that a lot. I like that atmosphere a lot where they have live music, and it's just a great place to go. As far as, Manhattan, I really haven't been going to bars there for many years. When I was in 11 truck, we would go up to like the 50s on the east side, and there was Turtle Bay and some of the bars up there in that area where that was a little bit of a hot spot. But restaurants, Walensky's Grill is really good on 49th and 3rd. That's a really good spot in Manhattan, where you could go for drinks and get a really good meal. But yeah, I kind of like to try different places, when I am up there in the city. So I don't have a real, place I always go that's like my favorite. I bounce around.
It's good to mix it up. The producer Victor points out that I forgot to ask the third question on the rapid fire. So I'll just go back to that real quick before I ask the final one. That is, funniest firefighters you've ever worked with across your career.
Funniest firefighters, no doubt. Although every firehouse, we call it the same circus with different clowns. I don't know if you've ever heard that. So
yep, I have.
And it's the truth. There's a type of guy in each firehouse that could be brothers. But working in 28 and 11 as a firefighter, we had some really funny people there. Mike Darcy, John Lamarquis, Mark Washington, Jimmy Kelly, and it was their mission in life was to make people laugh, and we laughed all day long. A little shout out to the 2811 crew. They're having a big reunion down in Florida right now. They've been doing it now. We've been doing it for a few years. I have never made it down there yet. They're all retired except I'm the only one still working. But they're down there in. They have about at least 30 people down there from that used to work together, and there's some great stories, and and every day was a challenge to being making people laugh. It was a big part of the culture there.
And now for the final question, the rapid fire. You kind of touched on it earlier, but I'll say the same. I'll ask you the question. If you could expand on it, that'd be good. What advice would you give anyone coming on the job now?
Somebody coming on the job now, I would say you need to know the history of the job. It's very important to know the history. Where how we started out. What the different periods are in the job, like the war years, like if you're a really very young person, what went on September 11, 2001, and the department's role there, and what happened there, and continues to happen with the illnesses. What was going on back in the early days of the department in Manhattan, and how the outer boroughs were built up to become what the FDNY is now. I think that's an important part of appreciating all that the job stands for, and the history of the job is important. I would tell them to even if they don't become a boss, to study the books, to learn the job, always be proficient in your procedures. I would tell them to be respectful of everybody. It's important. Even the people we serve in the city, you're a representative of the New York City Fire Department, and hold yourself in high esteem as you work in the city, and even off duty. It's important. There's so many things, and I would tell them to enjoy the job. And I would recommend, and it's not for everybody, that they build a career path. We have available now, like you can actually build your path of, that you're going to have to go to college if you want to become a chief one day. So, start that out right away. Go to school at night if you don't have a degree yet, right? And just, start reading. Read every tour. It's going to serve you really well, especially if you want to get promoted. So, be a student of the job, be respectful, and, learn the history of the job, and, come to work every day and be prepared for anything. Anything can happen. You have to always be prepared. Wear all your personal protective equipment, as you operate in the environments we operate in. It's for your health, and it's for your family, that you stay healthy on this job.
Mm-hmm. And not only on the job, but once you retire, you want to stick around, you want to enjoy your family some more. So make sure, it looks cool in the moment when you're coming out the job, you got all that sooting on you. Everybody knows you were just working. But when you get back to the firehouse, clean that gear off and clean yourself off, because you got to stay clean. And more importantly, you got to stay healthy, you got to stay alive. So that you can enjoy your family, as you said. Chief, this has been amazing. Stick around. We'll talk off air. But before I say goodbye to the audience, any shout outs or anyone, I should say, or anything that you would like to give?
Well, I gave a shout out to my brothers I worked with in 2811, who are down in Florida right now enjoying a reunion. And, a shout out to, all the members in the field who are doing an amazing job. I'm impressed every time I go out the door and I pull up to a job. I'm always, impressed by what they're doing out there. So.
Hats off to them. They do indeed do an excellent job day in and day out. Unsung heroes, I say. And that includes EMS. I'm glad you mentioned Chief Fields earlier.
Absolutely.
Certainly his division, EMS, all the guys in engine truck companies, SOC, whatever it is. Thank you, because you guys, man, you don't have an easy job. You work at the greatest city in the world, but if it's going to be complicated and it's going to happen in a city like New York. But you guys handle it. You handle it with grace. You handle it with professionalism. And certainly this guy, even though I'm in Connecticut, I'm in the city a lot. I appreciate it every time I'm down there. I know all the New Yorkers watching tonight or will listen to this later certainly appreciate it too. So thank you, Chief, and thank you to the FDNY as a whole. Guys, this has been fantastic. Like I said, I really have you guys to thank for constantly supporting this show. We've done 300 of these bad boys now. We're going to keep going. The march to 400's on, but thank you, because like I said at the top, if you don't have an audience, you're not going to have a show. So thank you for being as loyal as you've been. I really, from the bottom of my heart, say I thank you, and I appreciate it, and I love every one of you very much. So just again, I appreciate all that you've done to make this show what it's become. Coming up next on the Mike the New Haven podcast, it's interesting. He came onto the NYPD in 1985. Worked his way into the emergency service unit, was there in ESU for a while. Now he's an ADA. He's a district attorney out on Staten Island. He worked in Brooklyn previously. So he's gone from two sides of the law. One is a police officer out in the field to now being an attorney. And that's going to be Tommy Ridges, who will join me this Friday for volume 42 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's emergency service unit. In the meantime, on behalf of producer Victor, who deserves a shout out as well before we go, because this guy, again, he's made my job easy. Vic, come on the screen a second. I want the audience to see you before we sign off tonight. This guy right here came on last summer. And let me tell you something. I was a one-man band previously. I'm not just saying this because he's my brother. He's been an A1 producer. He has lightened my load tremendously. He makes my job so easy to where all I have to do is focus on these interviews. So a lot of the reason why the show goes as smoothly as it does is because of this guy right here. So I could not let tonight's milestone episode pass without thanking my man, my brother, who I love very much, and who was the best producer a guy could have, the one and only Victor Mignetti. So with that said, on behalf of producer Victor, Chief of Department Jack Hodgens, and every single one of you that has supported me to this point, I'm Mike Colón, and we will see you next time. Have a great night, everybody. Stay safe. Take care.